Jonathan. You're muted. Jonathan has muted himself. I've always told him to do that, but now he's taken me up on it. Jonathan, can't hear you.
Right.
There you go.
Yeah, can you hear me now?
I was telling him, I've always told you to mute yourself. You sound much better that way, but I think we need to hear you.
Yeah. Good. Hopefully you can hear this coming through now. Yes, right. What a way to start the week. Yes, apologies there for the technical weirdness. So it's a great start of the week. This is the format, the dictators, and drum roll, please. We should have got some sound effects ready. One of the dictators.
Hold on. No, you want some going on here. I'm with you here. Hold on. How about this for you?
What have we got? Oh yeah, okay. Yes, very nice. Boom. One of the dictators has fallen. And we'll introduce David formally, properly in a second. But I think one of the really interesting points that come out of it is not that, and a couple of the troll comments have been like, well, you've been calling Orban a dictator, and look, he's gone, he's conceded. Well, I think this is not because he's not a would-be dictator. If the result had been incredibly close, if they could gerrymander it, if they could steal it, then they would have done that. But the result was such a catastrophic landslide. It was so huge, there was no way to actually steal this result or obfuscate it. It was clear as night and day. I think they realized that if they did try to steal it, then there would be some huge manifestation, as there started to be in central Budapest, against it. And they really realized the tide had turned against them. And indeed, it seems that Hungary's foreign secretary has disappeared. I wonder whether he'll turn up somewhere in Moscow over the next few days. That's the typical pattern. Before we get much further into it, we have David Debato, host of the No Delusion Zone, and he's going to tell you a little bit more about where to find his writings and output.
Thank you, Jonathan, and welcome all of you to the newest episode of The Dictators on this Monday. And indeed, I am the host of the No Delusion Zone on YouTube. I ask you all, recommend that you go there and take a look at it as well. No Delusion Zone on YouTube, as well as my Substack, which is protectingtherepublic.com. You can see the website there and the address. I encourage all of you to go there, check it out, become subscribers at both of them, because like Jonathan, I need all the support that I can get. I can speak for Jonathan, I think, on this. I think we are the voices of the opposition, at least voices of the opposition to the radical right, to fascism. So we need all the support that we can get. But again, thanks for visiting us on this new episode of The Dictators. I think the focus today has to be, Jonathan, on the election in Hungary, of course, Orban, and also on the blockade that President Trump, and I still hate calling him that, but President Trump has called in Iran. For those of you who may not know and have slept for the last 24 hours, Viktor Orban lost. Yes. And his party lost big time as well. So I think it's May 14th, sometime in mid-May, that he's going to be gone. The current administration will be there for about another month, and then he's going to leave. And the winner is Peter Magyar, who won, and his party won as well. So they will be taking over the government in Hungary. Even though, and Jonathan and I were talking about this, Magyar is, you could say, a populist, light. He's certainly not in the orbit or universe of Orban, but he has a lot of the similar types of beliefs in terms of immigration, gay rights, and so forth and so on. But he definitely supports Ukraine. He is a supporter of integration with the EU. If he just focuses on those two things to start, I think he's going to be good. Well, I'm sorry. Also corruption. That was a big, big reason he won the anti-corruption platform against Orban. So anyway, that's a huge plus for Ukraine and the EU that Orban lost, Magyar won. And in fact, let me just really quickly, before we get into that, I want to show you the face of the, where is he here? The loser. Thank you. And goodbye, Victor. And this is the new going to be the new prime minister, excuse me, of Hungary, Peter Magyar. I may be pronouncing that wrong. But congratulations to him and good riddance to Orban. What do you think, Jonathan? What do you think for the future of Ukrainian support and the EU under this new administration, which, as I said, comes into power in about a month?
Well, I think the first thing we're going to see is a lifting of the blockage of the 90 billion euros support for Ukraine. We'll come into sort of Peter Magyar in a minute, because he's not, we don't know exactly what he's going to do. We don't know whether he's going to be Orban light, or whether he's going to be more of a traditional conservative, actually governing in the interests of his own country, whereas one could say that Orban was governing in the interests of a small clique of kleptocrats, a business elite who were taking over the country, and the system was weighted towards their benefit. There's a lot of actually similarity there between Hungary and Georgia in that respect. You know, we think of authoritarians as being these individual figures of you know, strong men, etc. But more typically in, say, Georgia and Hungary, it's a cabal of corrupt business people, politicians, and so on, wanting to stack the dice, wanting to turn the entire system to their benefit. And of course, people who want to play fairly by the rules and have independent courts, but that doesn't really play so well in this system. So one would hope, you know, whether he's right of center or a centrist, more likely to be, you know, conservative, as it were, more right of center, as long as it returns to some kind of rule of law or level playing field, then I think we'll see Hungary flourishing, because it has all of the features, I think, required. Strong culture, strong technical capabilities, well-educated young population, etc. Geographically, you know, well situated. It's within the EU, so a rule of law country operating within the EU has lots of chances, I think, to enrich itself and grow its economy, as Poland has shown after the last over the last 30 years. So we've got to watch out for that. He hasn't used Ukraine as a football during the election campaign, so I think the signals there are good, that we may not get, you know, an absolute hawk. We may not see Hungary providing Ukraine with weapons and sending big dollops of cash and stuff, but as long as they don't get in the way of other EU countries who do want to do that, I think that is a huge progress.
Oh, I agree. And look, I'm not going to try to understate how crucial and important this was. What a positive thing this was that Orban lost, his party lost, that a reform party, a very anti-corruption party, has come into power. I want to play a very brief clip about how this has been received in Hungary. I think it's important, because I think we need to all share in their joy. I hate to use a cliche, but we're all Hungarians today. I mean, this was huge.
Köszönöm nektek, hogy elhittétek, hogy meg lehet csinálni. Köszönöm, hogy elhittétek, hogy megváltoztathatjuk a sorsunkat. Köszönöm, hogy elhittétek, hogy a saját történelmünket mi magunk, a magyar emberek írjuk. Köszönöm, köszönöm, köszönöm. A magyar emberek ma igent mondtak Európára, igent mondtak a szabad Magyarországra, igent mondtak arra, hogy képviseljük őket, hogy segítsük őket, hogy rendbe tegyük az országot, mert ez egy magyar kormány.
Amazing! Can't describe it. We cannot describe it. We are so happy that Orban is finally gone.
We are glad to feel some sense of hope finally.
Yes!
Yes!
After
Yes!
We changed the system.
We changed the system.
Finally, I can say that I can be a proud Hungarian. Finally, after 16 years.
And it goes on like that. I mean, obviously, it's contagious to feel their joy. Again, I can't overstate how important it is for not just Ukraine, which it's huge, but I think for all of Europe. I mean, as you know, he's been the main stumbling block for many, many initiatives, of course, including Ukraine, but many, many initiatives by the EU and NATO. And he's been, I'm talking about Orban, one of the best forever friends of Putin. Now that's gone, and we'll see what happens. But I'm very optimistic.
I think a very positive sign, definitely. And what one gets in those videos and from the reports of Kanan Robertson, who's been on the ground, is a sense of relief, a sense of unity, a sense that most people are actually behind this change. That's not going to be the case necessarily when other would-be autocrats or other sort of weak strongmen fall. I think Hungary is in a good position there because they can move forward with someone who was from the same, let's say, political shade, as it were, but who is at least nominally in the election campaign disavowing the corruption, the nepotism, and so on. So it's not going sort of too far away politically from where they were, but it's a new character and it's a fresh start. This kind of transition, I think, and an emerging sort of consensus is going to be far more difficult in other places, especially the US, where the division is so acute. And that worries me somewhat, that where politics has become so divisive, has become so much a part of people's identity, rather than being able to sort of look at it from a more rational policy perspective, then the demise of Trump may not necessarily lead to some emergence of consensus. It may not lead, well, there'll be a lot of joy, but it'll be very partisan or sectional joy. You'll have others, who will be, angry and looking for the next figure to replace. So this is fantastic in this context here. This isn't necessarily a template for all the weak strongman to fall. The question I'm going to chuck back at you, of course, this is a huge blow for Putin. Putin sent his GRU minions and officers, and one of his senior lieutenants, Sergei Kirienko, has been overseeing this. Putin has invested a lot in Orban over the years. He's had unique access to decision-making processes within the EU and NATO. That, we presume, is now gone. It may get worse than that. It may be that Hungary's foreign minister could easily, I think, be prosecuted for treason based on the materials that have come out in the last couple of weeks and in the context of this election campaign. So Putin is the huge loser from this.
Well, absolutely. But the obvious question that people will ask is, okay, how is that going to affect Putin? Personally, is it going to result in any more of an upheaval in mass demonstrations that were last seen, in 2012, I think, in Russia? Is this are the Russian people going to look at this and say that this could be us? I think the answers to all of those are no, no, and no. As you alluded to, these are different situations. It's just a different circumstance. In Hungary, Orban did try to game this. He did gerrymander, redraw the maps, the electoral maps. I think that one of the differences was in Hungary, at least, that the vote was so overwhelming. There was such an outpouring against Orban and against the last 16 years and against the corruption in this specific country that even his gerrymandering, his rewriting of the electoral maps and all the corruption and all the bribes that he paid still couldn't overcome the outpouring of the electorate. We're seeing something very special here, but possibly very unique, at least in terms of Hungary. To answer your question again, I don't see this affecting Putin in terms of his grip on power. He's just got such a grip. He's been so brutal, and the security services of Russia, as you know, are far more are larger and far more successful and brutal than anything that's been in Hungary. And I dare to say, except for the younger people that are using VPNs, which is a sizable number, the average Russian over the age of 50 probably isn't even aware of what happened in Hungary. And if the Kremlin has anything to do about it, they're not going to know. So I don't think this is going to affect anything in the Kremlin. Certainly, Putin's not liking this. He is a big loser. He's a big loser in this, but will it relate to any change in the political situation in Russia? I think not in the short term anyway.
The other loser, of course, is J.D. Vance. And I've got two questions for you here. I mean, one, is there going to be any blowback, any issue? Because J.D. Vance came over, he has invested some of his personal cash and reputation. And of course, now it seems that his presence accelerated the defeat. You know, it made Orban even less popular than he was before. And the last week is the story of that accelerating move away from Orban. One might say maybe accelerated with the help of Vance. So is this going to damage his political standing? Did he not really have any to start with? The other question is, well, why did he invest so much? Why did he risk so much? The same with Trump. Is this out of sheer desperation, or are they deluded enough to think that they could lean on the scales and have a real impact there?
I think the latter is true. I mean, I think that they are deluded enough to think that they would have an influence. And in fact, I believe it had the opposite influence from everything I'm reading. It either didn't have an impact at all on the electorate in Hungary, or it had the opposite effect, because Trump is not very popular there, except for those, of course, who support Orban, which, as it turns out, was a minority. Why did Vance go there? Because he was ordered to go there. It's not that he's a dummy. He's far smarter than Trump, but he was ordered to go there because Orban, like Putin, is a BFF, a best forever friend of Trump. He sees himself in Orban as he does see himself in Putin and Xi, you know, and any of the dictators like that. So he told Vance to go there, give it his best shot. He would have made these two clowns go over there as well, but they were taking part in disgracing themselves in Pakistan, trying to solve the Iranian issue, which we'll get to next. But no, he really thought, Trump really thought that he could influence the election, just as he really thinks he can still influence the elections in America by giving endorsements to Republican candidates. And what's happened, Jonathan, is that the last few Republican MAGA candidates that Trump has endorsed have lost. But he deludes himself by thinking that that was a cheat. That's fake news. It really didn't happen, just like he didn't lose, the 2020 election. And so he goes, blindly on. Will this hurt him? Will this hurt J.D. Vance? Will it hurt MAGA? No, not at all, because most MAGA people don't read the news, and they don't really know what's going on in Hungary, nor if they did, do they care. They're going to love MAGA. They're going to love Trump. They're going to vote Republican no matter what happens. So the answer to that is no. It's not going to matter one bit.
And of course, I don't know how many within the American media system really pay a huge amount of attention to what's going on out there. The other thing I think it will do in Europe, which is one we were talking about just before we hit record, and that is an interesting one. It shows that conservatism is potentially possible without it also being a nepotistic and kleptocratic kind of elite, rotten to its very core. That I think is important. And the fact that Magyar did not in any way within his campaign use woke or identity or illiberal sort of talking points, I would say almost these sort of fatuous talking points. No, there are many, many issues around so-called identity and woke agenda, but I think they are far, far lower in priority than things like the economy, creating equitable wealth, building infrastructure, all sorts of nuts and bolts, grassroots issues, in my view, are far more important than identity politics. And that's not to say that identity doesn't have some kind of role in the agenda, but what we've seen in the left and center left politics is these have come to the fore, and they've been positioned above, I would say, things that are far more important, including defense. Defense and security should be, near the top. MAGA seems to have gone for these bread and butter issues. And I think this is an incredibly important thing, that a conservative wins on these more traditional platform of engaging with local communities at a village and a town level, and basing his campaign on the things that they care about, that are intrinsic to their life and their quality of life, running businesses and so on. because most people there will not have as their number one issue the sort of stuff that just seems to form the bread and butter of not just leftist campaigns, but the way the conservative right then seeks to bash the left and say this is all they care about. But if you reflect it back, the conservative media is weirdly and unhealthily obsessed with these issues as well.
Well, Ann Applebaum in The Atlantic wrote a great article alluding to what you're talking about. And I think her phrase was that authoritarianism is not inevitable. The illiberal democracies are not inevitable, meaning they can be beat, just like what happened in Hungary. Again, like you said, it's not that it can be replicated in every illiberal democracy or in any dictatorship or any authoritarian government, but it's not inevitable. It can be beat when you've got an engaged electorate. And I also agree with you a lot, and you and I have talked about this before. I believe that the left, not just in the United States or the UK, but in Europe and just generally, tends to go too far left, too far radical. I hate to use the term too far woke, but I will. They tend to focus on things that the majority of people don't care about. God bless the trans people and their parents. But for example, to focus on that as the progressive left does in the United States is a losing issue. It's a losing issue. I'm sorry. To focus entirely on whether or not gays or trans can use bathrooms, the same bathrooms as a boy or a girl or a man or a woman, which is a huge issue here, Jonathan, by the way, is a losing issue. And Magyar purposely stayed away from that. He stayed away from the issues that most people don't care about, and he focused on the ones that they do. And it's the same everywhere. It's the economy. As Clinton was told here in the 1990s when he ran, he was told, it's the economy, stupid. Just keep it focused on that and you'll do very well. And he did. He won twice. And in Hungary, it was the economy. Orban had completely ruined the Hungarian economy, mainly due to corruption, but also by his policies. So the people were hurting there. Look, Jonathan, if you can't put food on the table or a roof over your head, you don't really care about much else. Geopolitics and gay rights and trans rights and even human rights or international affairs really don't enter into your equation if you're starving and freezing. And there was a lot of that going around in Hungary. I believe that is where the left usually goes wrong. They go too far to the left. Stay in the center. Most people don't want unlimited immigration. They don't want their country overrun by people who don't speak their language and probably won't assimilate. They don't want to focus on issues that most of them don't care about. They want to put food on their table. They want to put a roof over their head. They want to be able to pay their bills. They want to put clothes on themselves and their children. And above and beyond that, they'll look at other issues. And that's what Magyar ran on, and anti-corruption, which leads to all of those problems. And he won. The people spoke.
And I've always had the impression that actually it's the weaponization of these issues by the right and then labeling their opponents, demonizing their opponents, that is actually the greater problem. But it's a problem on both sides if they can't focus on the issues. And Cheryl here makes, I think, a useful point here, but also having spoken to some people who worked behind the scenes on the Democrat election campaign, I did get an impression from them that there was a considerable amount of chaos. There was a considerable amount of disagreement behind the scenes, and this not mentioning the issues in the fore, as it were, in public, isn't quite mirrored based on what happened behind the scenes. There's a huge debate going on, people trying to push forward these issues, and actually a lot of the policy discussion, it's seen behind the scenes, really kind of got bogged down in the weeds. One example, for instance, would have been, when defense issues were being talked about, and rather than talking about the big picture strategic defense issues, apparently a lot of discussions got bogged down in gender-related sort of, angles towards that, which is, it's still an issue. It's not an issue, but in terms of priorities, it comes fairly low down. So this is interesting. It's a real blow, but it's not the end of the authoritarians. and it's not the end of the need for the dictators as a theme. Let's turn to the other thing that we were going to talk about in the time that we've got, and that is the blockade of the blockade. Just when I thought the madness could not get any madder, and quite a few commentators have had lots of fun with this, Trump threatening to blockade the Straits of Hormuz in reaction to the blockade that Iran is doing, and the absurdity of that. And then there are all sorts of practical questions. You haven't blockaded the Straits just by writing a tweet. You have to physically send ships there to interdict. An extraordinary video emerged from the weekend with a US destroyer basically being told, given their marching orders by the Iranians, saying, get out of this area. And they did actually comply, and they conceded. The Iranians seem to be finding all this extraordinarily hilarious. But there are practical questions. Is the US going to prevent Chinese vessels, for instance, from going into the Straits? The practical questions just sort of multiply. And of course, there is no credible answer coming from the White House, just these threats of blockade to end a blockade. What we also know, because we've talked about this before, is that the Iranians can activate the Houthis. And not only can they blockade the Straits there, they could mount a blockade of the Red Sea. And then we're talking about all sorts of economic and financial pain kicking off.
Well, yeah, I mean, the latest now, as of when we speak, and it's, well, here it's a little, it's about 10:30 Eastern time. I think it was supposed to kick off at 10. The latest blockade of the blockade that Trump said is to blockade all of the Iranian ports. He's apparently, at least now in this minute, going to allow other ships to transit in and out of the Persian Gulf. He's just not going to allow any ships to go in and out of Iranian ports. You mentioned the Chinese. Guess what? They get 90% of their oil from Iran. Is the American Navy, the U.S. Navy, going to interdict and board Chinese vessels that are leaving Iranian ports? I don't know. I mean, until recently, I would say no. Of course, that's insane, but we have an insane president. How about the fact that our military is under the guidance of this individual? Okay.
Keg's Breath, as someone has named him. Keg's Breath Hegseth.
Yeah, Heg's Breath. Do you think that this individual is going to be able to successfully blockade Iranian ports and make a successful decision as to whether or not to interdict, stop, and board Chinese vessels or Indian vessels? They also get a sizable amount of their oil from Iran. But maybe you can't depend on old Heg's Breath here to make that decision. I think we might need some divine intervention here, Jonathan. So how about this guy? All right. I think this is the guy that we need. Call on him. He put this out. This wasn't made for him. This is on Truth Social. Trump put this out that he is Jesus. He's Jesus curing a man in bed. And look at all of the sycophants around him. Look at their faces looking up to him as Jesus, praying, just idolizing this man. To any human being, Jonathan, to make himself look like Jesus is not only blasphemy if you're a Christian, but it's disgusting. And to have the president of the United States do this, and worse, to have his supporters, to have MAGA say, okay, what's wrong with that? He is anointed by God after all. So you got a choice between this guy and this guy.
And this is where it gets really crazy, of course. And actually, anyone who watches, the Russian Z Patriot world will know that it's just populated by a bunch of crazy people who have no coherence. All they have in common is their own sort of greed and self-entitlement. But the Russian sphere is also a mixture of really weird, superstitious belief, mock religious, mock philosophical nonsense. It's just like a kasha of tripe. This is being reflected here. You have the administration attacking the Pope, You have Hegseth wearing these crusading symbols and talking in messianic terms about American power. And then you have Trump depicting himself as some sort of divine being or channeling, and that image is just nuts in itself. Quite apart from the fact the guy that he's healing bears an uncanny resemblance to Jeffrey Epstein. The whole thing is
yes, he does. And where was Trump and Marco Rubio during the negotiations? Here at the UFC fights. That's him.
Is that Joe Rogan on the left there?
Joe Rogan.
This
is where the president and the Secretary of State, who's also the national security advisor, were during these crucial negotiations with Iran. Just as you can see, paying very close attention to the negotiations. I mean, what a disgraceful symbol of America, of anything.
Yeah, it's primitive, it's weird, it's perverse. What they're saying and doing is unhinged. It's as if, again, we come back to this idea that if you were going to write a script in the Kremlin of how you wanted to destroy American power as quickly as possible, well, you couldn't do it any faster than these guys are doing it. Yeah, they're working at a furious pace to dismantle everything that was rightly respected about American power and statecraft. And they are becoming the absolutely, not just the worst version of what America has done in the last sort of 40, 50 years. They're jettisoning everything that was good, that easily outweighed the negatives. And they're doing it on steroids at the same time. It's and there we go, steroid injected. There's a comment there, but this is just nuts.
No, I couldn't agree with you more.
End is my question.
Well, you know what? Here's the end, and I have a 38 second clip that I want to play for folks about the issue that you're talking about. It's my 2 cents or 2 quid or whatever it is in the UK. Take a listen to this, because this is what I truly feel. I'm going to tell you, and I'm going to close on this. There are 50% of American voters who are just as stubborn and far more patriotic and far more educated than those who support Donald Trump. And they will not stand. Haters, write to me. Say whatever you want. I really don't care. I'm telling you, I'm telling the world, anyone that's listening to this, we will prevail. America will be back again. I don't know how long it will take. I pray that it's relatively soon. I think that it won't, but we will be back, because there are tens of millions of Americans who feel just as I do. And there you have it.
I truly hope so. And from all the wonderful people in the audience here, making their comments and so on, I know that there are many, many thousands who are just consuming our materials. There are many, many millions who consume the sort of wider ecosystem of materials. And there are many, many hundreds of thousands who are very supportive of Ukraine. We know that. There are many who are out there fighting, who are both on the conservative side and on the center and what counts the American left. There are people from entire political spectrum fighting for Ukraine and uniting on issues of freedom, innovation, law, justice, all these things from a wide variety of backgrounds. So we know it works. We've seen it work. It's not always easy, but the people who are pro-Ukraine are showing that they can at least put the hard work in, not to just slack each other off every minute of every day, but find a way through their differences. So I think that's a personal experience that we've got there. My last question to you is, I don't understand how those who have genuine faith and who follow Trump for whatever reasons, but they themselves have a genuine faith and belief, etc., how they can look upon that image and not see it as the embodiment, actually, of the Antichrist. Not that they see that who Trump is, but the manipulation of those religious images. How can they look at that and not be deeply offended by it?
I think the answer is, and I have thought about this a lot, is that they are deeply offended by it, but the things that Trump speaks against or speaks for, I'll put it that way, such as racism, and more importantly, that Christians, hardcore Christian orthodoxy, should rule America, that we have been, always have been, and always will be, first and foremost, a Christian nation, period. Since he is behind that, they have been and will be willing to forsake almost all of the morals and values that they claimed to hold so dear. They will hold their nose up to what they see and hear about Trump as long as he pushes forth what their agenda is. And I, of course, forgot abortion. As long as he pushes forth America as a Christian first nation, is against abortion and life first. They and unfortunately racism, they are going to support him regardless of what he says or does that goes against the Christian faith, goes against the Bible, goes against the sermons, goes against everything that they claimed to believe in, which years ago I said that they are the biggest hypocrites ever to draw breath. The Christian evangelicals, that's who we're talking about here, are the biggest hypocrites ever. They've lost any credibility with me. If they can forget what they're supposed to believe in their soul, in their heart of hearts, just because he supports things that they support, they're done as far as I'm concerned. They're traitors. They're traitors. And they're traitors to the church, not to mention the United States of America. But that's the answer to your question. If he supports the things that they hold dear, the most important things for them, they are more than willing to forsake and abandon their morals and their strongest beliefs.
Truly, truly disturbing. Well, I'm going to, hopefully later in the week, we're going to get some people who can sort of comment on that from the inside. Pro-Ukraine evangelical friend of mine, Greg. Terry, I think, would be a great guest to have on to sort of talk about these issues. We're also going to hopefully, and David doesn't know this yet, but we are hopefully doing a mini live marathon on Friday. But more details of that as we try to confirm the times and the parameters of that. We'll get back to you on that. Otherwise, 3 o'clock daily UK time, British Summer Time, we'll be doing these. For today, though, thank you so much.
Take care. We'll see you soon.